As if this big fall cold front wasn't enough in the weather world, we've got a storm collision now coming as a Tropical Storm Philippe is going to be headed towards the northeast. And of course, the big front involved will bring in the dry air. I have all the details that you need to know in this video. Alright, let's go ahead and turn things over to Radar Omega to give you an overall model run look for us here. First of all, we've had two enhanced risk zones in a row. One of them over portions of central Kansas. The other today, as I'm filming this on your Wednesday, into portions of Texas and Oklahoma. Nonetheless, this front weakening significantly and actually having to be picked up by a new low pressure system as it pushes east Thursday into Friday towards portions of the mid-south, towards the Ohio Valley. The only benefit of this storm, it is bringing some very beneficial rain to areas in drought here into portions of Louisiana. And of course that nice cool air behind it, but no one likes these rainy times, especially as we go towards the weekend in the northeast. And again, notice what's going to be hitting up against the rainfall there into portions of the northeast as this system goes through. And then, of course, we've got Philippe coming off the Atlantic waters, a very weak tropical storm, but nonetheless bringing the chance for some rainfall. Really, that's going to be the main threat with this, combining up for some flood threats here in the northeast with the existing system. So let's time this out in better detail here. You can see we've got a low-pressure system, again, dragging its way across portions of the central part of the country. This is more of your cold front timing this time around as I play this model out. You can see, again, pretty stormy there into portions of the South Texas, into the Arklatex region. Places like Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, this is where we're in very significant drought right now, and we could use the rain. Every little drop we get is good, and there's a good chance we could get some pretty hefty totals, maybe an inch or so, out of some of these heaviest storms that push on through this area, maybe even a little bit more in a locally higher amount. But this is all courtesy of the cold front. We've got cooler spilling on in behind this system, and that's what you can really see on your screen being indicated now as that front continues to progress on off towards the east on your Thursday afternoon. But as we continue to play things out beyond then, here we go into our Friday, then talking about your early Saturday morning. And then here we go towards around mid-morning Saturday. That's when we have the low-pressure system that picked up this cold front that I was talking about in the last video. It moves on up into the northeast. It's curling up to the northeast, and it's going to pick up Philippe, what's left of it anyway, and really drag that on up. Very similar to the path of Lee, while everybody else dries out with cooler air moving on in, even in the southeast where this front would normally look like it's draped along. The dry air overtakes it, and we just end up very comfortable here in the southeast. Now, in terms of your temperatures for your Thursday afternoon, we're still very warm with mid-80s here across portions of the south and east, but where we have 50s is up here into portions of the Dakotas, Minnesota, as well as portions of Montana and Wyoming. Of course, in the higher elevations there in the Rockies, we've got some 40s as well. And the nighttime temperatures are going to be what's, of course, most impressive with this. And yes, we will get some freezing temperatures Friday morning into portions of Montana, portions of Wyoming, portions of the western Dakotas. It's really going to be Saturday morning. That's a big one for the freezing conditions. So I'll show you that in a minute. But look at this. We've got 40s and 50s at best for highs Friday afternoon here across the north central. Still keeping it pretty warm across the southern tier and very warm in the southwest. But look at how Saturday morning is going to be really one of the coolest mornings, especially across the north central tier. We've got these 20s and 30s diving all the way on down into portions of northern Kansas as the expectation from the National Weather Service at this point. But this line I'm drawing out now, look at this. This is the entire line of where we've got about 50 degree or lower to the north of it. We've got 50 or warmer below it, and that's a pretty big line that goes all the way on up to the Appalachian Mountains. Saturday afternoon, warming into the 50s in the Great Lakes region, and then look at this. Some of these cooler temperatures in the 40s shift eastward, and you'll wake up to some pretty chilly levels. Sunday morning here into portions of Appalachia. Look at this in Texas, places like Dallas, places like Lubbock. We could see these temperatures down in the 50s at night, and then recovery starts to happen and back across the plains in the afternoons as we get back into the 60s by Sunday afternoon into the Dakotas and Minnesota. Still unseasonably cool air in the Great Lakes at that time, though, as that cool flow continues with the dip in the jet stream there across that region. By the way, let's talk about how the dew points go down with this system. Very dry air will settle in towards the east. Anywhere you see in these brown colors, that's where we're talking about dew points, basically 45, 40, or below. This is some very dry air, and the driest air since spring for many areas, especially in the southeast where the humidity has just been skyrocketing up and down all summer, and it has definitely not gotten below 60-degree dew point for most areas, which is barely comfortable. Tropical storm is heading for the United States, and you can see this is Philippe. This is the cone. It's expected to ride right on over Bermuda before curling on up towards the north and northwest. Not a very strong, not a very healthy system, and it's barely going to be a tropical storm or a post-tropical system as it passes by Bermuda. Definitely a post-tropical system by the time it makes land landfall here into portions of, say, Newfoundland, some of these Prince Edward Islands areas here in Canada. But overall, wherever this makes a landfall, it's going to be weak. There's barely a chance for tropical storm force winds. The main threat I would be watching out for here in a place like Maine is the rainfall out of the system. And let's talk about how this is going to go. I'll talk about rainfall totals more in another video on Friday. But for now, let's look at how the system pushes on off towards the east. You can see rainfall here in the Great Lakes region. This is our cold front, but we've got a disturbance just off your screen on the bottom right side, and that's going to come into the picture later in the day on Friday. And you can see it right there. Some of those yellow colors there. This system's going to be moving on off towards the north, and look at how that puts it right in time to connect with that cold front and push right on up into the northeast. Basically, the main low pressure system, the cold front here over Canada, is just going to completely suck this up, create a battleground zone here over the northeast. And this isn't going to create significant conditions, but certainly some gusty winds, some very heavy rain, just a mess. Look at this. This is early Saturday morning. You want to wake up, enjoy a weekend. Maybe you've got college football home game here in the northeast, hoping to enjoy the cooler temperatures. Yeah, the cooler temperatures are coming with this mess, and you can see this southerly flow coming right off the Atlantic, hitting the northeast, these Cape Cod regions, areas hit by Hurricane Lee, indeed, or what was left of it anyway. Yes, feeling the impacts from this. Areas feeling what was left of Ophelia, feeling the impacts from this. Here we go, Sunday. You know, most of the impacts are going to be north of the mid-Atlantic for us here. So places even from New York City northward, or excuse me, New York City southward will overall be clearing out, especially as we go towards your Saturday night, towards your Sunday. But look at the wraparound moisture on your Sunday. This is the GFS model, the Euro, not as gung-ho on this, but nonetheless the chance for some of those wraparound bands to be producing maybe a little bit of our first lake effect snowfall of the season, or definitely at least the chance for a mix here coming out of Canada and entering portions of northern New York. So I would watch that in that area. Maybe a place like Mount Washington gets some snowfall as well out of this system as it curls back around. But both models definitely showing that wrap back around. And look at this. This lingers into our Monday with more of that snowfall as well as the lighter rain wrapping on around. And that will add up over time to at least some decent totals. But the good news is this is overall happening at a pretty slow pace, especially on the backside of this system. So even though the rain will have been persisting for, say, 4 days in some areas on and off, it's looking like the back half of this system will definitely be the much lighter side in terms of precipitation. But definitely be aware that you could see your first snowfall into portions of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. It would be very light, and it would be barely a dusting. New York with the best chance to see some sort of lake effect enhancement on that. Your 6 to 10 day outlooks look like this. Here's your temperature. You can see we're going to see temperatures getting well above average here over portions of the northern plains as we head towards your middle to the latter half of next week. This is as we're talking about heading towards mid-October. I know we've just started October, now we're already talking about mid-October. The only spot with the wraparound northwesterly flow there coming off the lakes there in the northeast. And then the one thing I want to point out on this precipitation outlook, one, we're very dry here in the Four Corners. The main thing here is that we're very wet in comparison to average here across the Gulf Coast and in Florida. This helps with the drought continuously in Louisiana. But one thing I do want to point out is that this is tropical induced and that we'll have moisture coming off the Gulf of Mexico. So I'd watch that very closely if I live in Florida with some of that moisture lingering around for any sort of weak tropical development. But for now, here are the credits. I would appreciate it if you'd subscribe.